Hello, welcome back to another episode from Driving Britain. Today we're going to be looking at California, or more specifically, California's homeless problem. Now this isn't just a thing that's in California, this is all across the US. In fact, it's all across all of our countries. But now America seems to be suffering with massive homeless populations, huge ghettos kind of popping up around the place, more than most other Western countries. Or at least that's how it seems.
So, a lot of people say homeless people, they're addicts. They made decisions that they need to. If you want to create a situation where you can live like that, then you deserve to live like that. You made that choice. Like, I don't know. Is that not true?
That's all bullshit.
So what percentage of the people out here in this place?
Probably 5% of people use drugs. A lot of these people on the street are productive members of society. Doctors, lawyers, dentists, secretaries, construction workers, electricians, plumbers, mechanics.
Now, I don't really know just how much America are suffering with this. I don't know how many homeless there are, but I know that it seems to be quite a big thing. Now, in the UK, we don't really get these big homeless camps like what you see in the US. I'm sure that there are probably some around, but you never really see them. They kind of try to keep themselves out of public sight as much as possible. We obviously have homeless, which is bizarre because we've also got empty houses, council houses, government, state-owned houses. So why we have state-owned houses and homeless at the same time, that's something I'll never understand. But in America, they seem to be trying to get people off the streets and back into housing, but they can't produce the houses fast enough. Well, that's what's claimed. But the people actually living on the streets, they're just saying that, well, actually, there's just no real initiative to get them off the street. There's all of these noises made through the different political entities, but when it really comes down to it, they're just noises. They're not actually doing anything. They're not really getting anything done. Now, in some places they are, there are big breakthrough areas. Some people are really determined to try and help people back. But the thing that I think is most surprising about American homeless is you're not just talking about, when you think of homeless people, you think perhaps people that got involved with drugs, then started to lose the job, alcoholics, ends up on the street through wasting all their money on really bad stuff, really bad life choices. I'm not having to go at people that end up in that situation. I think that everybody realises that they're only ever just one or two decisions away from ending up in a similar sort of situation. We all think that we're on the perfect path, but it doesn't take much to knock us off our trajectory and put us into a really different place. And people that have ended up with kind of really bad situations, they know just how easy it is to end up from a really good situation into just a really bad sort of place where everything just snowballs and gets worse and worse. And that's kind of how we view homeless. We think that that's where the homeless population are. That's where they come from. I think people made bad decisions on drugs, that sort of stuff, and then they end up homeless. But that's just not the case a lot of the time. Sometimes it is people that are kind of running away from stuff, or they've made bad decisions and they've ended up in that situation. But now with America, it's just that prices are so high for accommodation and basic stuff that people are being forced into having to live rough. Now, we're not just on about road workers or people that normally dig holes for a living or that are cleaning gutters or anything like that. We're on about doctors, students, managers, all sorts of people, all sorts of grades, all sorts of levels of education. And we're not talking about people that are on drugs and so we're on about normal people that just can't afford to live. They can't afford to pay out the thousands of pounds a month for accommodation, for housing. So they end up having to live rough until they can get enough money together to try to improve their situation. But usually the situation is very difficult to get out of. When you end up in that sort of place, then it's really hard to get yourself from living on the street to having somewhere to live. Now, if you've already got a job and you're having to live rough in your van or something like that, then you've probably got a little bit better chance. But if you're living completely rough and you haven't got a job, you're not an educated person, you're just an average person that couldn't afford your rent and you ended up homeless. Now, trying to get yourself from being homeless, trying to get money together again to try and get back into the normal kind of run of life of society, that's near impossible because you need to get a job to get the money, and you're not going to get a job if you're living rough because who's going to employ you? It's a very volatile, self-perpetuating sort of scenario. But now in America, like I say, you've got all people from all sorts of levels and grades that have ended up living homeless in recent years. We're not just on about the throwbacks of society or however you want to normally view homeless people. We all kind of have our own version, our own mental image of what a homeless person is. what type of person they're likely to be and why they've ended up homeless. And usually it's because we're thinking the worst of them. And maybe in days gone by, maybe that was true. But nowadays it's not. It's just that life is so expensive. People are forced into it. Normal, everyday people, just like you and I. Right, let's have a look at this video and see exactly what they're going to be covering. I've not seen the video. I've seen a couple of little excerpts, but I've not really watched it properly or anything. I know that Oakland in California is a hotspot for this. And I know that California is a hotspot. But, you know, I'm from the UK. When I think of America, the biggest places that I think of are LA, California, New York, and Las Vegas. But it turns out that all these places have also got massive homeless areas. California, I think of that as one of the nicest sunshine sort of areas to go to. Glamour and everything like that. That's what I picture when I think of California. But apparently that's not the real California, or that's not the real California now. This glamorous image that we see, that's just a minority. That's not the real California. Right, let's get into the video and see exactly what they've got to show us.
Oakland, California sure does have a homeless problem. Driving around town, there's homeless encampments all over the place. They're on the sides of the roads and dirt lots. There's long stretches of them on sidewalks. Some are in tents, some are in RVs, some are actual encampments with makeshift structures where hundreds of people gather into communities. It's estimated there's about 5,000 homeless individuals throughout the city of Oakland, but nobody really knows the exact answer. And the number of people on the streets in Oakland's nearly doubled in the last 2 years alone. A lot of that has to do with the high cost of living in the Bay Area. Apartments that were once $1,000 a month now cost closer to $3,000 a month.
Yeah, $3,000 a month, that's a huge amount of money for anybody to have to try and pay out. Where's an average worker going to get that just to pay for rent? So you're not on about running a vehicle, you're not on about eating or any of the basic necessities that it takes to actually live. That's just to get a roof over your head. You can see why somebody would think, yeah, say if you just about had enough money to pay that out, or your option was live in, get a van for a few $100 or maybe $1,000, like a rider van or something that's got a bit of space to it. Pay that once, and then you don't have to pay out $3,000 a month every single month. Imagine how you could increase your kind of quality of life, being able to buy clothes and all sorts of stuff like that by not having to pay that amount out. So you can see why people that are living in normal sort of circumstances are changing to it, because by the time they've paid out their rent, they're left with almost no money for living. Or the alternative is you live in crappy, horrible conditions, living in the back of a van, but you have enough money to be able to actually get a reasonable standard of actual life, food, clothes, general stuff. But at the same time, you then lose the ability to have things like running water, a working toilet.
Apartments that were once $1,000 a month now cost closer to $3,000 a month. A lot of the homeless are addicts, but there's no real one reason homelessness is so high in Oakland. If you ask 10 homeless people why they live on the streets, you're going to get 10 different answers. Look at this one in West Oakland. This one is sort of sanctioned by the city, meaning they don't run them off. Sometimes it's easier to keep them in one place so they can monitor them and provide support. But this problem's impacting the community in a big way. Local businesses complain about losing customers. I mean, would you want to park near here to shop? Residents complain about homeless people stealing from them. Neighbors complain about loud noise and trash. Some say helping the homeless is backfiring.
Yeah, the thing is as well, you're not going to want to move to that area, are you? You're not going to want to put your business in that area. You're just going to want to avoid that entire area completely. So it means that that entire area then becomes unusable. So then you end up with more homeless moving into the area because nobody else will go there. And then it just becomes a huge ghetto. And then you're almost kind of normalising it then.
Police are already stretched thin because of low numbers. There's many reasons for that. Vaccine mandates, early retirements, and being defunded. Now, I spent 2 days driving around Oakland looking at how run down this once proud city's become. And along the way, I recorded all the homeless camps I saw. But there was one particular homeless camp that I stumbled onto which put into perspective the state of homelessness here in Oakland and actually changed.
You're saying all the homeless camps that he's come across, that makes it sound like there's absolutely loads of them. We're talking about California in the US, one of the most iconic cities, states, whatever you want to classify it as. It's California in the United States. This isn't how people around the world mentally picture California. How have you become like this? Is it just that this is happening so much across the whole of America that even places like California, they're also kind of being affected? Or is it that it's starting in California and places like that where people want to flock to, but they realise that actually everything's so expensive they can't afford to live? And when they end up homeless, then they also can't afford to move or get out of it. So then they're really kind of stuck there, aren't they? Is that how this is starting? Is that how it's creating? Or is this just what's happening in every single city in America?
My perspective on the homeless problem in general. As I was driving around on the west side of town, I came across a huge makeshift camp made up of RVs and improvised shelters. Something that looked like what you would see in a third world country. It was under a freeway overpass across the street from a public park in an abandoned area.
You know, when you watch one of the driving videos from India, Pakistan, and they're going into the different areas where there's no development, that's exactly what you see, exactly what you're looking at on the screen right now. Or in Africa, where they're in areas that have roads built by the Chinese, but there's otherwise absolutely nothing and no real infrastructure or economy in the area. Everybody's broken and you're just about surviving. They're living in that type of accommodation. But we're talking about California in the United States. That's what you're currently looking at, not somewhere in, a developing or third world country.
Were warehouses that people had used to dump their crap for years.
Or maybe we are. It's just
RVs
that
parked here
we
were
didn't
actually
realise
the
it.
working poor. People who had decent jobs but still couldn't afford a place to live in Oakland. Some are even doctors who were new to the city and had to save up enough money to afford a down payment on their first apartments. But many of the people...
Yeah, that's not the first time I've heard that. 'Cause, I used the reference about a doctor earlier because I've seen a couple of different videos about this sort of stuff before. It wasn't about California, it was a different area. And it was people that trades, high class trades, things like doctors and lawyers, solicitors, things like that, where they had gone through university. They'd incurred massive amounts of debt during university, and then they'd finally got a job, but the job was so low paid because they was at the bottom of the ladder, just beginning in the workplace sort of thing. They were being paid such low wages, even though it was in keeping with what everybody was being paid at their kind of level. It wasn't enough to live. They couldn't support themselves on that sort of wage. They certainly couldn't pay anything towards their massive bills from all of the debt that they'd incurred. So they was having to live homeless while they tried to get themselves a bit more financially secure, and then tried to move into an apartment and then kind of start the life that they probably thought that they was going to have when they first started university. You start university with the idea that you're going to become a specialist in something, and then you're going to get a job where you're not going to get great money originally, but you think you're going to be getting wages that's much better than anything that you'd ever get if you hadn't have gone to university. You think it's kind of the beginning of a fantastic work life. Levels of money and success that you couldn't dream of without the prospect of going through university and doing all of that hard work. But what's actually happening is people are leaving university and ending up living in their van because they haven't got enough money to even pay their rent, let alone any of the debts that they've been paying out to get to that point in their life. That's just stupid, horrendous and wrong. How did we ever end up in a situation where that is normal or acceptable, especially in a Western country? We're all about California and New York and Miami and Las Vegas. It's just madness that this is actually happening. I don't want people to think that this is all about America, because it's not. I'm sure it's happening in every country, including the United Kingdom. But right now we're looking at America.
Outside of the homeless RV park were people who had been here for a long time. Some were trying to save money to change their situation. Despite the way it looks from the street, this camp was well organized. There's even leaders here who enforce rules, and there's even camp security. It's a camp with community and pride and progress. And as I learned, a lot of the people in this camp are actually trying to make this temporary homeless camp their permanent home.
Those of you who listen to our videos often will probably know that I'm a psychologist. That's what I originally trained as. Then I was in the military for a few years and then went on to other stuff afterwards. But I've worked in the field of psychology for almost 2 decades. The first work that I started to do was working on a European Commission project. It's based around decision making and things like that. But by the way, when I was originally training, one of the things that you have to learn about is group dynamics. So when people end up in a new situation together, how they kind of form groups and how those groups interact with other groups, and then that kind of makes up society, I guess you could say. So if somebody goes to prison, there's different hierarchy, different groups, the way that people work. When you start at a college or school, then there's groups, and one group kind of feeds off another group, which feeds off another group. All of those groups, they're like cogs in a big machine, and you take one of them out, then the system kind of doesn't work properly. One of the things that we was encouraged to do to try and get our head around this was to read a book called If This Is a Man by Primo Levi. And he was one of the Holocaust survivors. He describes when he's first in the camp how they kind of, you have somebody in there that's trying to make different things that other people might want. Just like in a prison, you'd have somebody that's devised something so they can try and heat up a sandwich. You have other people that do tattoos, some that will cut hair. Well, in the Holocaust camps, he was in Auschwitz, they had different systems, different people that were kind of a whole society that indirectly developed just to keep, the social dynamics working. Some people would create stuff and make stuff, an actual working society inside that pressure cooker. And when you look at these camps, and exactly what he's been describing there, that's exactly what you've got. You've got an entire society, a small version, but an entire working society in that little group. You've got people at the bottom that's just coming into the camp. You've got some of the camp leaders. You've got some people that might try to cook some of the food and other people try to buy it. People setting up little random food stalls of some sort. An actual real like mini city all inside that camp. And that's something that I'm sure that you're going to see across all of these camps, because that's almost how humans work as groups together. But the fact that these are so well established and so almost formalized that that's happening in homeless camps right the way through America, that's just madness.
Their goal is to get Caltrans to donate the land to a nonprofit they had set up so they could raise money to build a permanent village of tiny homes where they would then live. So they were squatting here until they could get agencies to help them with their goals. As they would explain to me, they'd be getting a job and a house at the same time, since their jobs would be building their new homes. And then after their village was built, their jobs would be managing their village. They're serious about it. This man...
You see what I mean? They're talking about trying to obtain the land from the state so that they can start to make formalised housing. And then they're going to have people looking after the housing. They're going to have some of their own people acting as the builders to construct the houses. Just like when people first moved to a new land, the way that they would kind of, build it from nothing into a society, into a working town. That's exactly what they're trying to do, because as far as they're concerned, they no longer fit with normal society. They can't fit with normal society because they can't afford to. It's almost been in like an alternative reality, isn't it? They're in this completely other situation to the bulk of the world, to the bulk of the country. And they're having to kind of make a new life, a new city, a new town, a new village, all in those little camps. How did America's homeless problem become so big that this sort of thing can even start to evolve? We're not on about just a couple of people sleeping under a bridge because they've got no money or because they started taking drugs. You're on about whole societies starting to develop as like this whole underground society. A society within a society.
Man goes by Ohio. He founded this makeshift camp 15 years ago.
We started feeding people out of my house. And then me and my wife ended up separated and I ended up in the streets. That was about 15 years ago. I ended up down here. I was the first one down here. The police ran me out of here.
You were the first one here?
First one here. There was no tents, no nothing. I had a black Dodge Dakota. I was sleeping in. I was scrapping metal at that time. And then I got sick from being down here and all this stuff. See, these people get sick. You get sick from, not from the COVID, not from none of that. It's from the garbage that people come dump. These aren't the people that's dumping this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, like, yeah.
You can tell. These aren't the people that's dumping.
Well, that's one problem that you're always going to have, though, isn't it? Because if you see a dump area, then people in normal society, everyday people, they seem to just flock to it, don't they? And they dump all their rubbish there. In the UK, we've got a lot of country lanes and stuff like that. And if you end up with one in a pretty desolate sort of area, then you can drive through it and it'll be perfect. But then you get one van pull up and dump a load of their stuff out the back of the van, illegally dump it. Then you can drive past there in a few days' time afterwards, before the council, the government have had a chance to go out and clean it up. Before they get to that stage, someone else will have seen it and think that's a good idea, and they do the same, and you notice that these piles, they just grow. And you imagine if that's city size, which is their small city that they've got going on there, you can see how people will keep dumping stuff into their area. But also in their actual area itself, they've got no running water, they've got no flushing toilets. The reason why a lot of the diseases back in the day used to be so dangerous and used to wipe out so many thousands, so many millions of people, is because of non-sanitary conditions. And that's how they're living. You think of the Great Plague and stuff like that.
No. Cars are coming in here, trucks are coming here, loads coming here and dumping stuff here. And so the rat problem that we have are from people that are dumping. So I had a tent down here for a long time. And then just about a couple of months ago, they moved me into my apartment.
How long were you here?
I was here about 15 years.
15 years?
Yeah.
Living in a Dakota?
Yeah.
And you finally...
A tent and a Dakota.
And you finally got out of here after 15 years.
Yeah.
How did you get out of here?
Huh?
How did you get out of here?
Focus. I'm not a man. I could live on the street, I could survive on the street, but I don't belong on the street. None of us belong on the street. A lot of these people on the street are productive members of society. Doctors, lawyers, dentists, secretaries, construction workers, electricians, plumbers, mechanics. All these people here have a trade.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying earlier. You think of homeless people, you think that you're on about drunk winos. That's not it. That's not what America's got as their main homeless population right now. You're on about skilled workers. And they're having to live in those conditions because they can't afford to live in normal society. But they're still having to go out and do their normal jobs and stuff. But then they're coming back to that.
And they've been pushed out by these dot-commers, by how Oakland has took the rent control and put it on stable. So now the people that, because they're unstable, these guys come in here, they build these places, and now in a studio costs $3,000. Who?
Yeah, that seems to happen a lot, especially I know that it's a big thing in America, but I'm sure it happens in all of our countries. But in the US, the government actively do this with some areas because of seeing other people talk about it. You'll have, like the centre of New York, say, you'll have the most expensive apartments in the centre. But then on the outskirts leading further and further out, then the price kind of decreases because you're further and further away from the centre. And that's great, but as you fill up the centre and everybody's bought up all the housing, then you've still got people that want to pay a lot of money because they want to be as close to the centre as possible. So then that next area outwards, where it used to be, the second on the kind of price list, not top price, but not the lowest, there was in the middle, they want to put them onto the higher bracket so that they can start charging more money, making more money out of it. But the only way they can do that is to get rid of the people that's currently in it, and the only way they can get rid of them is by keeping increasing the prices until they can't afford to live there anymore and they have to move out. So then they move into category 3, into the third area, the outer outskirts. So then you've got the primary, most expensive, and then the secondary area also becomes the same as the first one. It's just that now the first area is a lot bigger. The second area is then spread out further, and then an area that never used to have housing has now started to take on development because everybody that used to live in the cheaper kind of the outskirts, the third area, I guess you could say, they no longer have somewhere to move to because there isn't a fourth area. You just end up with other states and stuff like that. Then you've already spread to the outskirts. Yeah, you could have more housing built and things like that, but it doesn't really work like that. The way that the government seem to kind of focus it, or at least the housing associations and whoever else seems to have control of this, their main focus is get the people out of the second area so we can make the primary first, more expensive area bigger. And that makes it so that everybody that's in the cheapest housing ends up clumped in one grouped area together, because they eventually keep on getting pushed out further and further and further until there's almost nowhere left.
A studio? Come on, who pays $3,000 for a studio? A studio costs $3,000, so that's what happens when you get pushed out and there's no rent control. In Berkeley has rent control, but we don't.
So what did you saved up money and were able to get a cheap place? Is that how you got? Or
No,
the
there's
city
programs. Project Dignity and BACS is a good program to hang with. And these programs will help you get out of here. As long as you stay focused, as long as you stay on their backs, they're gonna help you get out of here. And I stayed on them, and I stayed on them. I didn't want to survive, and I didn't want to live here. I didn't want to die here.
Yeah, it's fantastic that he managed to get out of there, but at the same time, it took him 15 years to get out of it. From ending up with everything going wrong and then becoming homeless to getting somewhere to live again. Just to get to that stage took him 15 years. Who's really got the mental strength to be able to achieve that? When it starts to take that long, it's got to be easy just to give up and just succumb to your surroundings and just believe that that's as good as it's ever going to get, and just to go backwards.
Here, I didn't want to die on the streets. That's what I didn't want to do. And so I stayed on their backs. Project Dignity got me into a program called Safer Ground. Safer Ground put me in a Days Inn out there in East Oakland. I stayed out there for like 4 months. Then my housing came through. BACS helped me with housing and get into the program. I got into BACS program, then they helped me get into Abode, then Abode placed me into a place. These programs work if you know how to get into the system.
So given how much did you have to pay to get a place? Did the city pay for everything and you just...
The city basically paid for my first, last, and deposit, and I pay rent every month.
And the rent's cheaper than it would be if you...
Yeah.
What's the rent cost?
My rent is $276 a month.
And who pays for the rest of that?
I guess housing does.
Like the city of Oakland or something like that?
Housing authority or something like that.
How long do you get to live cheap like that?
As long as I pay my rent, and as long as I...
Yeah, and the UK's got a similar sort of system. So if you end up with no money, then you can claim benefits. If you've got nowhere to live, then you can be put into emergency housing, a hostel or something originally, and then put on a housing list. You could get a place with a private landlord. So, not in a council property, which can take a long time to get into. But for a private landlord, then not all of them will accept state benefit type people. They believe that they're just going to trash the apartment or house or whatever they're trying to rent. It's not always easy to be able to rent somewhere if you're on state benefits. But they do exist. There's quite a lot of them out there. There's quite a lot of places that you can get. And then the state will kind of pay for your rent for you. And he's saying that there is a similar thing in the US where they kind of transition you from the homeless through to somewhere to stay in between times, then to get into the system, and then to get into having somewhere to live. But if that actually works in a big enough scale to be able to actually deal with the problem, then you wouldn't have American homeless. Yet we're seeing people pour from normal apartments into being homeless. It's not turning it around. The homeless population isn't reducing, it's massively increasing. And I'm on about, I don't know what the stats are. I'm sure that somebody can look it up and add it to the comments section. But the rate that homelessness is increasing in all of our countries, not just the US, but especially in the US, it's just at such an astounding rate. So the systems are there, but they obviously don't work on a countrywide basis. I'm sure there's individual areas and particular individual projects that are working, but what about kind of globally across the country?
I renew my lease as long as I do what they expect me to do.
There's hundreds of people here. Why don't they?
Because they're still building places for these people.
Yeah, but you're not in a new. You're like in a Days Inn. Are you in a new place?
I'm in a new apartment.
Like an affordable, like the new
I
unit.
have a 1-bedroom, the Arroyo apartment, the Aurora apartment.
Like brand new, the city built
brand
for
new.
this problem.
No, this.
Yeah, he just made a good point. He said, "Oh, you in the Days Inn, as in the motel, hotel type places? Why don't the council, the government, house them in the cheap hotels? Then they wouldn't need to build places, would they?"
No, the city didn't build it. A company came from out of state and built 4 complexes.
So that the homeless people have a place to transition to. Now we just don't have enough cheap places for all these people, though. There's thousands.
We
of
do,
people.
but we don't. There's a system. I'm gonna say this one more time. Where there's a problem, there's a solution. There's a solution to every problem. Just like when you go fishing. If that line breaks, there's a solution to that line breaking. You attach it to another line, and once you attach it to another line, you throw it out there and catch the fish. It's the same with the whole homelessness. You attach it to another line and fish and catch them and send them somewhere else. It's a solution to this problem. We just don't use that solution. There's a big.
Yeah, because there might not be very many private housing associations like what he's managed to get into, but there are a lot of motels and hotels and stuff that do take anybody and everybody just transiting through the area. There's no reason why they couldn't be put up in those places, and I think that's what he's kind of saying, isn't it? There is a solution, they're just not taking, the government's not taking it.
Solution. Oakland gets too much money for the homelessness for it not to be for these people. Man, all these vacant buildings, open up a shelter, open up many shelters.
Like right here.
Yeah, you got all this stuff out here, you got all these buildings, you got all these lands, you got all.
Yeah, they're on about building new projects, and they've just done this massive brand new housing association he's talking about. But like you said, there's buildings already there. Why are they going through the expense of doing that? Why don't they just use what's already there and get 3, 4, 5 times the amount of people off the street for the same amount of cost?
All this abandoned stuff, and you talking about there's a solution. Oakland has too much money for it not to be a solution. There's a big solution. I got a big solution for this problem.
Yeah, but the money of the city never goes where it needs to do.
You can get them medical, you can get them back to the workforce, you can do all that through these programs that they got.
Mm-hmm.
It's no way that these people should be homeless.
So, a lot of people say homeless people, they're addicts. They made decisions that they need to. If you want to create a situation where you can live like that, then you deserve to live like that.
Bullshit.
You made that choice. Like I don't know. Is that not true?
That's all bullshit. You tell those people that think that 90% of these people are using dope, using drugs, that's a lie.
Or like you did, and then that's how they became homeless was addictions.
No.
So what percentage of the people out here in this place?
Probably 5% of people use drugs.
Used or use?
Use drugs, use whatever situation.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. People have this idea that homeless, they're all drug addicts and that's why they've ended up homeless. But that's just not the case. It's purely about society's too expensive to live in. Our cost of living is so high that we have normal everyday people en masse becoming homeless. And the US is kind of at the sharp end of this. They're at the tip of the spear. This is where it's happening the most at the beginning. Most of the countries seem to kind of, or at least the UK, we kind of echo what America does 5 or 6 years after it goes through the US. They seem to, we seem to have similar sort of things transition through the UK. So this should be a pretty big wake-up call for the UK government, because if this is happening in the US now, then it's not going to be long before it's happening on a larger scale in the UK. I'm sure it's already happening anyway. Well, I know it's already happening. There's people choosing to live in their vehicles because they can't afford the rent. There's quite a lot of people that are starting to live on the road and things like that.
So 1 out of 20 is an addict. The rest are people like yourself that
want to get out of here. They want to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not in this lifetime they were pushed to the streets. These people wasn't addicts. These people didn't use drugs. Some of these people worked in the city. Some of these people work with the councilman. Some of these you have no idea how much education is out here on the street. So they could miss me with that bullshit about the drugs and all that shit. That shit's a lie. All that shit's a lie. Don't believe the hype. It's not true. It's not true at all.
So
the other thing that you got to think about, I guess, is if you have got normal everyday workers that's living like that, there's no level of hygiene. So people are going to start to, they're going to start to stink. They're not going to be as clean as what you want people to be. If they're a manager of a fast food restaurant, you're not going to want that, are you? Or if they're a solicitor, a lawyer, they've got to have a way to stay very clean and smart. Or even if it's just somebody that's working in a warehouse, the people around them are going to want them to be, not smelling like a homeless guy, I guess. So how long is it going to be before they start to lose their jobs because of the conditions that they're living in, which is then going to make their conditions and their outlook a lot worse? But also, if you were talking about a lot of people, then it means there's going to be a lot of people not doing jobs in America because they've been sacked, because they're living rough, and so that they're not fitting into what we expect people to look at when they turn up for work. That seems like it can escalate very, very quickly, and then start to have an economic impact across the whole of the country.
You think it's just a cost of living problem?
Yeah.
It's just too expensive for people to live.
Who can pay $3,000 for a studio?
Why don't they just leave Oakland and go somewhere to Oklahoma where it's $700?
Well, you gotta understand. You gotta understand this. This is their home.
Yeah.
Most of these people were raised here. Most of these people were born here. They shouldn't have to leave where they want to be. I shouldn't have to leave and go to Denver. I'm from Ohio. It's way cheaper in Ohio than it is here. Mm-hmm. But I love California.
Yeah, but there's two problems as well. One, like you're saying, they shouldn't have to move. They shouldn't have people being pushed out of the city because they haven't got a good enough job or enough money to be able to live there. But at the same time, that is how the world works. So then what happens? All of those people move to cheaper places. So then the cheaper places surrounding California, surrounding Oakland, they're going to start filling up with people transiting from one expensive area through to a cheaper area. And because there's more people there, then the prices in that area are going to start to go up because there's more demand, which then that makes that itself an expensive area. So then what do people go off to the next cheaper area to keep transiting across America until they finally find a place that nobody wants to go to? That's not a solution.
California. I love Oakland, California more than anything. So why should I have to leave? Because you decide that you want to put rent control on hold and push us into the street.
You've also got to think about, if you're living on the street, where are you going to want to live? Somewhere further north where it's freezing cold, raining and snowing, or somewhere further south where you've got a blue sky most days?
It's not fair.
Are they going to ever fix it?
They're going to have to fix it.
But it seems like it's getting worse. With the cost of living is not going down.
I just want to say something. To all you rich people that have money, we're the poor people that need to make you rich. So you really need to do something about us that are out here in the streets, because without us, you don't get no money. You're gonna go bankrupt because you don't have that poor person working into your warehouses and creating that money for you. So you better really think about, we all need each other and start doing this thing the right way, because without the poor people, you can't survive.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying earlier. If people aren't able to kind of, keep up hygiene and that sort of stuff because of the conditions that they're living in, then they're going to start losing their jobs. And we're on about normal everyday people. We're not on about, the worst jobs in the country or anything like that. We're on about normal, regular people, regular jobs. And they're going to start getting fired more and more. Or they're just not going to be able to keep it up. They're going to start backsliding and things are going to get worse for them. So then those jobs aren't going to be filled. You're going to end up with quite a big void, and that's where it starts to make a really big economic problem throughout the country, a big workforce problem throughout the country. These people are being pushed out of society, basically, aren't they? And at the same time as being pushed out of the housing market, they're being pushed out of the work environment. They're being pushed out of society overall. And that's going to leave a very big void behind, because everybody performs a very big function in society, like the group dynamics that I was talking about earlier. You take one cog out of the system doesn't work. If you take a big piece out of the engine, take the camshaft out of an engine, you don't have a functioning engine. You can't move forwards.
And that's reality, and that's common sense. This man that runs your plumbing company, that digs your hole, and you want to get rid of him and hire some other cheap labor that don't do it right, you better think about it. All you Clorox people that own these Clorox,
there's going to be no cheap labor
that runs your lines, that runs your warehouse, that you done threw in the street. All you people that own these cereal companies, you got people that need to work Costco's, you got people that need to run those forklifts, it's millions of jobs that you need these people to do, but you push them in the street, and now you're talking about there's no work, there's no people to fill the jobs. They're right here in front of you. These people are right here in front of you.
Do you think all these hundreds of people here would go to work if there were if they had a place
to
that they could go home
and live.
to?
Yeah.
But they can't. they're not going to go to work living here, is what you're saying.
They can't.
Yeah, right.
Who's going to hire a person that can't bathe every day?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So a lot of these people haven't showered.
Their nutrition is not right. They're not bathing every day. It's all that shit is real.
And so even when they had proper jobs in the first place, then they end up moving backwards, going backwards, and ending up with no job and being homeless because they can't keep up with, society's rules, I guess you could say. I'm not saying they're bad rules. Nobody wants to be working with somebody that smells like they've been living rough for 10 years. I get it. Yeah, we're all like that. We all believe that sort of thing. It's just common sense. But at the same time, it is a big problem, isn't it?
It's real in this life. If you think it ain't real, come live down here for a week and see what is real. It's real.
Do you know, is there anybody that lives here now that I could go in and sit down with them and talk to them? Is that...
Go down there and talk to Moose.
Moose?
Go ask for Moose.
Ohio's gonna take us to meet Moose, who lives in a shed, and we might be able to go into his shed and see what's going on. Oh, this must be Moose.
Inside the camp, as you can imagine, it smells really bad. They have problems with rats and mud and everything else you'd think they'd struggle with. Some of these shelters in here are like little forts with rooms made of pallets and sheets and tarps. Some have living rooms and dining rooms and bedrooms. I have to admit, the kid in me would have thought they were cool forts when I was younger. Lots of the people who live here came out to talk to me.
Yeah, you imagine if one of those camps was a little bit further north with worse area, somewhere where it rains a lot, or where the temperature regularly drops down to 0, then it's going to become a lot different, isn't it? You're going to have a lot more harsh environment and you're going to end up with a lot more dead people. So people aren't going to want to stay homeless in those areas. They're going to flock to places that are more comfortable to live homeless, if there's such a thing. But that means then you're going to start to get all of the people of the US slowly flocking to those particular areas, aren't you? As the problem becomes bigger and bigger, and we're on about thousands upon thousands of people. We're not on about just a few camps here and there. We're on about a lot of people and a genuine problem running through the whole of the US. Not just the US, it's the UK and Europe and all of the countries as well. But right now we're looking at the US. So in the US, if that's happening a lot, which it is, those people are going to be moving to those particular areas because it's better weather. If you're going to live on a street, you're going to want somewhere with decent weather. That's just a no-brainer, isn't it? But if you get more and more people that's moving to those areas, that's not going to end well, is it? You're either going to end up bringing the area down because there's so many homeless living in that area, or that area is going to fight back, the governors and so on, and they're going to try to push them back out to other areas, keep pushing the problem from one state to another.
When they realized I wasn't there to gawk or sneer at them, to be honest, they were just glad somebody would listen to their story.
Have a seat on something that's dry.
Yeah, man. You said... Yeah. Like, it's like, is that sun's in your face? Let's go like over here. Like, can you stand right here maybe? And then it's not in your face?
Can I ask a few questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hold on, Dee.
All right, so I talked to Ohio, and he said that, a misnomer that people have is that people on the streets, it's their own problem, and then he said that you come from a good background, and how did you end up here?
The truth?
Yeah.
Drugs and being irresponsible, honestly, is what landed me here after all these years. Sorry, Dee, just a second. That's just the bottom line right there. I got caught up in a lifestyle that I couldn't control and landed here, but it's not as...
Yeah, and with the people that do end up in those sort of situations because of drugs, because they do make bad decisions, should that little period of their life where they made a few bad choices, should that dictate the rest of their life? No, of course it shouldn't. There should be an opportunity and a way for them to be able to get away from it. Just because people end up homeless because they were using drugs doesn't mean to say that they then continue to use drugs. But once they're in that situation, it's difficult to get out of it. I don't mean the drug part. There's a lot of people that live homeless that don't use drugs. Obviously, there's a lot that do, but quite a lot of people that also ended up homeless and then started using drugs. So It's not one causes the other. It's just something that coexists, and I think that we kind of need to realise that drugs is a factor and it plays a role, but it's not the thing that's going on here. It is with some, obviously, like this guy here, he said that he was using drugs and that's how he ended up there. But I don't want people to think that that's the majority of the people involved with this whole massive homeless thing that's going on, because it's just not.
I don't want to say it's bad as it seems, but I met a lot of good people out here since I've been out here. Learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about the community and society and how things really run and where the help is at. Learned how to build a little bit. I don't know. I don't want to stay here, but we're in the midst of doing something that could help tens of thousands of people across America, honestly, if things work out with us figuring out a way to help curb the homeless problem. And that's the biggest thing is housing, being able to afford housing and stuff. And really that's what we're fighting for on this piece of land that we're here right now. We're fighting to keep this so we can build miniature homes, affordable homes, and for the homeless people. There's other pieces of land around here.
Yeah, but really, the state's not going to allow that, is it? I know that they want to take on the land, they want to get it from the state, they want to be able to build some type of version of housing, which is going to be, pretty much what they've got near enough, I guess, but a bit more formalised. But the state's just not going to allow it, are they? They're not going to pay for proper housing to be built, and they're not going to allow them to build their own version of housing. What they're really going to do is just get to a stage where they want to move them on, and that's exactly what they'll do. They'll make them somebody else's problem.
But Caltrans owns most of that. So we're fighting with Caltrans and a couple of other little agencies and stuff to secure land and then develop it. We got an architect that's going to map out plans for us and stuff. And
so this may be future small homes, affordable for people that are homeless, maybe.
Yeah. We want to start off with the homeless because there's like 10,000 homeless just in Berkeley, Oakland alone, if I'm not mistaken. And then across America, you can imagine how many people are really homeless and stuff.
Yeah, I think that the homeless numbers across America, it must be into the million now, easily. I know that he was saying tens of thousands earlier, but I'm sure it must be a lot bigger than that now. I don't know what the official government records are, but the realistic number, I'm sure that they're astronomical.
No one can afford there are people who can afford to live in the Bay Area, but for the most part, affordable housing is not minimum wage. That's not going to get you affordable housing. And the affordable housing they plan on building here, out of 171 units, only 13 units are deemed affordable housing, and it's going to be for veterans and foster kids, if I'm not mistaken. Ones that have turned 18, though. And we're for that. We're happy that they have a place to stay, but nobody that lives on this site, and this is not just from here, it's from Wood Street, from this area, all the way up around to Target and stuff. There's about, I'd say, roughly 200 people. Not in the front, but there's a lot of them in the back still. Mm-hmm. That none of the houses are going to go toward, none of the apartments will go towards them. We've got apartments across the street being built. No one here can afford those, and most of them are.
When minimum wage is lower than the price of your rent, what option do you have? And that's just for your rent, not for actually living, eating, paying utilities, hygiene products.
More than half of them are empty right now, and they're building more of them. But right across the street, you have a bunch of people that are homeless and would love to be in a place, a warm place, but they're not being offered to them anyway.
So, there's a misnomer that the homeless population is basically people that made very bad decisions, a lot of addicts and stuff. But you think it's an affordable housing thing more than anything?
So anybody watching this and stuff, you tell me about how COVID affected you. Hopefully you're still in a home, and maybe you're not and stuff. But there's a lot of people that, and everybody knows this, it's not, it's a fact, that basically didn't work for 2 years almost. And then half of them didn't go back to work because now the businesses they worked for was out of business because it had no business because they weren't open the majority of the time. So anybody out there, there's so many people out here that lost their jobs or couldn't afford their rent because their job told them you can only work, from home or half the hours that you used to work, and I have a mortgage though, that, you know, so forth. No, it's not because of
It's a COVID thing more than anything, you think?
It's a accumulation of a lot of things. Some of the people out here, yes, they made bad choices and stuff. Some of the people out here lost their jobs during the COVID time. Some of the people had other hardships and stuff. It's not, that's another thing we're trying to express to people. It's not because of drugs and alcohol that the majority of these people are out here. Things happen, and if people out there can't understand or see that things happen to people in life, that cause things, and then you have a bigger thing that happens that we have no control over, like covert.
The other thing, I guess, that's the difference between the UK and the US is the UK government were reasonable at kind of making people were financially supported during COVID and trying to plug any gaps after COVID. So people that lost their jobs, trying to make sure that they've got enough money to live and things like that. I'm not saying that it worked perfectly, it didn't and doesn't. But at the same time in the US, you're on about not just, you've got the main government running all their initiatives, but then you've got each state running their own individual versions of housing and all the rest of it. So you've almost got too many chefs in the kitchen, I guess, haven't you, to try and roll out something that's affected the whole country in one. Then you need the policy to try and help those people to also be rolled out in one to cover everybody across that entire nation. But because of an individual states, I'm guessing it probably didn't work out like that in the US. I bet some states were better at providing services and stopgaps and money and support and stuff for those affected by stuff like COVID than other states. And I guess that kind of reflects across not just extremes like COVID, but across the whole deal, isn't it? When you end up homeless or in a situation where you're about to become homeless, I guess each state is going to have different provisions set up and also different schemes to try and get people from being homeless back into normal society and back into housing. It's not done by one entity, one main government. It's done individually and by main government. Whereas in the UK, local councils do have individual control, but it's kind of national policies that dictate what's really going to go on, and then the small tweaks within each area rather than the way it is in the US. So I think that's probably one of the things that's led to a slightly bigger problem in the US as a result of stuff like COVID.
Add that to just daily life and daily living and daily situation stuff. And then think about the Bay Area and how expensive $1,800, if I'm not mistaken, for Oakland is the average one-bedroom apartment, $1,800 a month. So you're thinking $20 an hour is still only giving you $1,600 before taxes. Take out your taxes, you got maybe $1,300, $1,200. You still don't cover your rent in one check. You have a car note, you have car insurance, maybe you have just one kid goes to school, one parent works.
How's that a feasible situation? No matter how much you work, you do a full 40-hour week or more. And before you even thought about food it costs money to go to work. The actual getting to work, eating while you're at work, just all the things, it costs money to go to work. Even before you get to it costing money to go to work, even before you get to I need to eat, I need clothes, I need to be able to buy soap, toothpaste. Before any of that, you can't even pay your rent because your wages are $200 short at the end of the month compared to the cheapest rent in your area. So what, you move to an area further away? Well, what happens when everybody moves to an area further away because the rent was too expensive in the middle area? That's just the same as the example that I gave earlier with New York, where the centre bit was really expensive, the outskirts, the stage 2 and stage 3. Stage 2 became just a bigger version of stage 1. Stage 3 became stage 2. Stage 3 disappeared. People got pushed into a single area or just forced off the map, forced into homelessness. It's not a solution. It needs to be fixed. You can't have it where basic minimum wage isn't even enough to cover the price of the average rent in that area.
Or what have you? Got to wash clothes, you got to pay electricity, you got to pay garbage, all this stuff, maybe your mortgage stuff. So you tell me that, who can really afford
minimum wage won't allow people to. So like the alternative thought is, okay, well, you decided to drop out of school so that you can't get a good job, so I don't feel bad for you because you made your own decision. So that's a theory that people have. Like, how do you respond to that?
It's hard to explain stuff. I tell people, why don't you come down here and talk to some of us and find out what the stories are
What's your story? Because you came from a good background, right? Like, you came from a really good background. You didn't grow up on the streets and shit.
No,
like,
not at all, not at all.
Middle class.
People make bad decisions. I'm talking for myself with this. I made bad decisions and stuff and got caught up in a lot of partying and didn't want to take responsibility. And by the time it was realized, I found out, jobs give you chances and stuff. And luckily enough, I'm a person that, my job gave me numerous chances and stuff. And I just fucked it off. That's me. I'm just one person that's out of 200 out of this area.
Yeah, but like this guy, he's saying, he took a load of drugs, made some bad decisions, went to too many parties. He did the exact type of thing that people think of when you think of homeless people. He did all that sort of stuff and then ended up homeless. That kind of stereotypical sort of thing that you think of. But then, what about afterwards? Once he's got no money, then he's got no drugs, he's not doing party drugs, he's not doing hard drugs, just normal sort of party type drugs is what he's talking about. Yeah, he might do hard drugs as well, I'm not on about that. I'm just talking about people who are doing party drugs and then they end up homeless because of it, which is quite a common thing. Should that really mean that you forfeit the rest of your life? You should then have to live homeless? You should never been given the chance to have a roof over your head, to live in a normal apartment because you made a few bad decisions? Why is there no realistic package to get people from that situation back into actual housing? I don't mean these little initiatives that pop up here and there and they're successful for their dozen or so people that they manage to help. I'm on about the million odd people that's homeless in America. Not on about a handful of people, we're on about 1 million people, we're on about tens of thousands of people. There certainly isn't infrastructure to get them back into housing. So what is society just saying? Well, they made a few bad decisions, they deserve it. That's not a civilised society. That's not how we're supposed to live. What are our countries worth if that's how we behave and think and act?
That's my story. So I'm not speaking for everybody. I'm speaking in general what I've heard and what I know of. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I screwed up. And now, I'm lucky enough, I found something in this group that we have come together to do something to sort of hopefully make amends with who we believe in up there, and do something.
Look at the area that they're in. I know there's all graffiti and that sort of stuff, but I mean, look down here at the rail tracks. At one time, this must have been a very big, popular industrial area, big enough to have rail carts running backwards and forwards to carry goods from one place to another. Car industry, steel manufacturing, something like that. So that area has gone from somewhere needing to have a train running in and out because their goods are being moved so much, so fast and so heavy and all that sort of stuff, such big industry, to a homeless camp.
Better than what we were doing before and stuff. That's all I can say is I'm trying to make up for it, anyone I've heard or anything, by doing what we're doing. And that's why it'd be great if more people come down here and talk to us about what's going on here, because I think they'd be sort of impressed about how far we've gotten with it and where we're going with it. It's not what they see.
What's your plan? Are you trying to get a job so you can get out of here?
I'm hoping that all of this turns into some sort of a paid job. Right now, of course, it's not paid because we don't have. But we want to create jobs along with the homes and stuff. There's so many talented people here that work on cars, who paint, who do electrical work. I'm a chef. They do so many different things. We want to create jobs here, and hopefully.
Yeah, that is one basic fact that we have to face up to. When you're on about getting these people back into work, back into life, a lot of people are unskilled. They don't have any qualifications, they don't have any skills, and they've never really had a proper job. Maybe breaking the law and other different things that's led them to being homeless. And so then trying to get them back into normal common society, that's a lot more difficult. That's almost a different evil to try and combat in itself, isn't it, I guess? Because you're not just on about people that have ended up on hard times and then trying to get them back in. And you can get them a job, you can get them into normal society. You're on about people that need to really start from the absolute beginning because they've just never done or never been interested or never had any of those things. That's an altogether different problem, I guess, and a much bigger problem. That's not just about homeless getting back into work. That's on about the massive population in America that can't work because they don't have the qualifications, they can't get employed because of their level of education or whatever the reasons are, the criminal records, all those different things. trying to get those people back into actual work. That's a really big job. And it's just fraught with so many problems and difficulties, because who's going to employ them? You've got the option of employing somebody that you think is decent. I say think because you never really know, but somebody that you think is a decent, normal, everyday person that lives next door, or a homeless guy that's got a criminal record, previous drug use and all the rest of it. Everybody knows who you're going to employ. It doesn't matter what's politically correct, you know realistically who you're going to employ. So I think that people who are in that sort of situation, trying to think of getting them back into work, that's just not realistic. But we should at the very least get them into some type of government housing, get them off the street at least, to have at least a minimal standard of living. America's supposed to be the biggest country in the world. Surely if you can pay millions out towards aid, same as in the UK, if we can pay millions of pounds, millions of dollars out to other countries in aid, how about we spend a little bit of the money in our own countries and get our own population off the street?
The outside community will solicit those jobs to promote more business and stuff. We want to keep it sort of here. We don't want, I can go out there and fight and go back to the hustle and bustle out there, but why not try to create something here that can help other people in my situation and make it a little bit easier for them to get back into the workforce and work at a place where they're more comfortable and people accept them for who they are, you know?
So like a nonprofit kind of thing where you could work for that and build
I'll be honest
affordable...
with you. Monty, can you come here? Okay.
I'll be right back.
Okay. See, there's a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of people here and that you could talk to that you get more insight from, because everybody has a vision, and for the most part, the vision is the same out here, is to create a small eco-village, tiny homes with jobs, affordable, through a land trust, which people wouldn't have to pay a mortgage or rent. They would have to work, basically, for their stay. And I'm not the professional on this because I'm not the one who brought the land trust to us. See, this is where it gets bigger.
We're trying to do a similar thing to that, don't they? And I think one of the American presidents did something similar just after Prohibition in the 40s, 50s, to make everybody get back to work. They gave people jobs of any and every sort just to ensure that they had a job, whether it was sweeping the streets physically with an actual broom type sweeping the streets, all the way up to whatever they could reach up to, just to ensure that everybody had a job. I'm sure that was one of the American presidents around Prohibition sort of era. Somebody added into the comments who knows that, somebody who does actually know about American history rather than me, who clearly doesn't. But I know that in China they do currently have that type of idea. They still run policies where they want to put everybody to work for as much of their life as the person can kind of put up with. People do retire, obviously, but the government take extraordinary lengths to try and make sure that everybody in China have some type of job. A lot of them, they're pretty, I'm not going to say meaningless jobs, because to the people that have the jobs they're not, but I mean they're not necessarily jobs that have to be done, that was necessary to make the country run, but there were jobs that were created and put in place to make sure that there was just a wide enough spread of jobs to employ as many people as possible, which is what this guy's trying to kind of describe, I think.
I was already here. A guy named Theo came and said and talked to us, said could he stay here. He wanted to do a land trust, secure the land, eco-village, smaller homes, affordable, and explained it to us. We loved it. We liked it. So we started moving forward. We have talked to the people in higher positions. We're talking with Caltrans. We talked with Caltrans the other day about slowing down with evicting people and how we could work together. We were trying to reach Habitat for Humanity, because they're the ones that's supposed to build on this with a developer. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get in contact with them so that we could talk about negotiating, maybe working together and doing something more positive, because they want to build, and we understand that on some land that they want to build on and things but you're displacing and putting out 200 people, and you're supposed to be helping house people, not unhoused.
Yeah, but realistically, if the local government wanted to build housing for the homeless in an area, he's on about all the different systems to get it built there, connecting all these different people and groups to try and make it work. But really, if the government, council, whoever wanted to put up housing for 200 homeless, they could easily just put aside a plot of land, have very cheap small housing built on there without any problems, and then just move people to it. Very easy, very straightforward, and not, in the scheme of things, that much money involved. Not as far as, the whole country's output of money goes. Why is it that you got guys like this trying to do it for themselves, kind of, physically connect all these dots to try and make it happen in their area? Because the local governments just aren't doing it. Just because they can do it, they're not inclined to do it.
You know what I mean? So
yeah. How can you? There's 100 and something thousand homeless people in California alone.
wow.
LA.
100,000 homeless people in California alone. 100,000. And that's the ones that's listed down on the government stats. So you imagine what the actual figure is. You're probably talking, 130, 140,000 homeless people just in California. When you think of California, that's not what you think of. From outside the US especially, with all the different countries around the world, if you ask them what you think of California, how would you picture it in your mind? We're not going to be picturing 100, 130,000 homeless people.
LA's got like 50,000, dude. LA County.
Yeah.
How do we build enough affordable? I mean, your plan's great. How do we do that for?
If you start, talk to Caltrans. Caltrans in California is the biggest landowner. They have land everywhere. Since I've been homeless, the amount of different places that I've been kicked out of throughout Oakland have all been Caltrans land, pieces of land, like all in the back where the freeway is.
Yeah.
It's all Caltrans land. It goes all the way up to Target and
So
stuff.
Caltrans is holding on. So if we can get Caltrans to donate a lot of land or whatever they do, then they can build. Who's going to pay for the construction of all that shit?
Nonprofits. I feel like if more people knew about it and came down and talked to different people about it and found out the bigger gist of it, people would fund it. People would help fund it.
No, I get you. So like a question would be, okay, so that happens.
Yeah.
Now you incentivize people to be fucking homeless because they're like, well, shit, if I'll get like a cheap place to live, if they're just going to build units for people, then
no, it's not just going to be units. It's going to be a community, smaller individual communities in a sense,
right,
that are self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And basically, like our community here, we don't have to go.
Yeah, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, isn't it? Building a city within a city. They recognise that they're no longer part of society, and they're trying to make their own society in this whole subculture. Just like the people in Auschwitz tried to make their own version of a small civilization, a small community amongst themselves. POWs have to make up systems to survive. The same dynamics that you have in any part of society, when you put a big group of people together, those same systems slowly develop again. They're always there. And it's because they're all key parts. They're all cogs in the same machine, and when you take one of those cogs out, that's when the system doesn't really run. That's why when you end up with a group of people together, like the big homeless camp, that's where you end up with some people taking on as leaders, other people taking on as some sort of security. You end up with police forces and all that sort of stuff, or some type of version of that. And that's because a kind of working society needs all of those things, all of those cogs to make the engine run. And that's pretty much what he's trying to develop, I guess. But should there be a subculture developed running parallel to the main kind of society? Because that's just saying, oh, well, these people are living homeless. They're no longer part of the main rat race. They're no longer part of the main society. So let's just push them to the side. They can have their own kind of little society, and they can just live out the way where we don't have to look at them. Is that really what we're at?
Too far, groceries maybe at this point and stuff, to get too much of anything. We help each other. If this person needs this and he has it, we talk to other little communities and stuff like that.
What's up,
and
man?
they help us out. This is Monty.
Can I show you? Can I record? Okay, I'm just doing a documentary on this and stuff. Hey, little dog, is that your dog?
Yeah, what happened to your...
The eye thing, it's really a tooth infection now, so I got to go back to the emergency. Evicted and going on to different places. This has been going on for at least 8 years of this buildup of...
if you're living homeless, the last thing that you want is to get some sort of cut, lesion or infection, because you're going to end up in a bad way pretty quickly.
Push and pull.
Yeah.
They've been pushing and pulling us I've been out here 7 years. And I came out here to die, but instead of dying, I found community. I really did.
You mean you came out here to die? Like you had no hope in life?
I didn't. I lost half my family members in 1 month, same month. My brother, he was violently murdered by the police. My father had 7 strokes. My grandmother, they both just old age. But it was devastating for me. I didn't know how to cope, and I made a bad decision. That bad decision landed me out here 7 years. But the last couple years, not so much. I'm trying to climb out now.
You're like nicely dressed and shit. Like, what do you do during the day to try to get out of here?
So during the day, I'm online. I'm filling out resumes and applications. I'm speaking to folks, and I'm getting like community side jobs. Like I do a lot of things. My father instilled a lot of different skills in me. So I can do mechanics, I can do facility management, and that's the inner workings of it as well. Like I can paint, I can fill the place up, all those things. So
just trying to get a job. What do you need to earn in Oakland to afford like the most basic place?
What do I need?
I get what does a person in Oakland need to make a month to afford to live here? Like
we need a team. Honestly. We need like 5 people in one house.
You need to cohabitate.
That's the only way that someone could sustain themselves here. Single income doing it, you would have to make more than $4,000. Well, that's your rent. It's about $4,000.
It's $4,000 a month to live here.
Anywhere between 25 and up. You can't get anywhere. You can't live here for less than $800. $800 you can't.
There's no $800 a month rent in Oakland.
No.
It's like it starts $1,500, $1,600, $1,700,
exactly.
and like that's way more than minimum wage, I guess, right?
It is. You won't.
That's just for your accommodation, just for your rent. That's not including your food or any of the other stuff, or your utilities, your gas, electric, whatever you've got. That's just for your rent, and that's more than what you earn in an entire month. How's that ever going to work?
Minimum wage, you won't be able to pay your rent and eat.
Right.
Forget any other amenities, right?
Yeah. So if you get a good job, like will your problem be solved?
No, because I still won't be able to afford the cost of living here. But what I hope to do is put that money, the proceeds that I am earning from work, into a trust where we can buy like a lot.
Yeah,
like this.
That's what you're well saying.
Yeah, I've already started 501c3 because people are going to have problems for a long time. It's the way of life. And those individuals get caught up in the middle somewhere, and they don't get the resources and the support that they really need to get over whatever the cause is, whatever the problem is. Like if I would have been able to speak to someone at that time, probably would have never quit my job, I probably really would not have given up my penthouse place to come here. So here, what we do is we meet people where they are, with the encouragement to slow down their usage. We don't force it. We just lead by example, and fortunately, a lot of people have taken up that,
Like they're cleaning their lives. They're the addicts, or you guys are able to help them get off the shit.
They've moved on, and we're still here.
What percentage of...
Yeah, because that's the thing with a lot of people that do end up in that situation through drugs. We're not always talking about hard drugs that are going to keep you addicted, and it's just going to lead on that very short spiral path until you end up dying. A lot of the time it's just recreational drugs, party drugs, and that's what ends up leading people to that sort of situation, because they're addictive in so much as that people like taking them, rather than you have that absolute need to take them just to get away from having the sickness. So them having a way to kind of lead people from the sort of behaviour that leads them to there, kind of, recognising what it is that they've been doing and being able to move forward to try and get back out of there, then I guess that is one of the areas where there's a massive lacking in all of our societies. And the fact that it's coming down to people living in the camps trying to have to kind of teach and give therapy and social skills to people in their own area. The people that are coming newly into the camps, trying to lead them through the cycle to get them back out the other side. The fact that it's people within the camps, living in the camps, that's having to do that just shows how badly society is failing. Because surely there should be mechanisms in place from the government to help those people out. There's always these schemes out, and they're always with best intention, but they never get enough funding to actually be able to make a real, genuine impact. It's not that they're half-hearted, it's not that the people involved aren't trying their very best, it's that the funding and the real government commitment is never there. That's what it really comes down to.
People that end up in a community like this are addicts or former addicts, and that's why they're here.
I would say probably about 20%.
Okay.
So it's not as high as you might think.
Yeah, I would have guessed half.
Yeah.
One in five is probably former or current addict,
Maybe.
and that's the reason they're here.
So in other camp it was about 5%, like other guy said, which realistically probably means 10%. He's saying that it's about 20%, which is probably realistically about 30%, which means that 70% of the people in that camp are there just because the cost of living of life is so expensive. Because we keep talking about rent, but it's not just rent, is it? It's the price of food, it's the price of gas, price of petrol, diesel. It's all of it. It's all just too expensive. The cost of living is so much more than what people can earn on a normal week. Prices have just gone up so much, and they've kept on going up to a stage where now people just can't afford to live. So now you're getting loads of people falling out of society because they can't afford their rent, they can't afford the food. People can't afford to live, so they're giving up the only thing that they can, which is the housing, and start living on the street and in the cars. So what, do we just keep letting prices rise until they then just give up on food instead? What do we give up next? Surely we can't just keep giving up stuff and everybody start living on the streets while prices keep going up. There has to be a government intervention to stop this massive price rise, and to not just stop it, but to push the prices back down to where they should be and to where they used to be. I know that prices never go back to where they started, but it needs to be better than where it is, because what do we do? Just increase wages? Well, if you increase wages and then increase the costs, and then costs keep going up and then wages keep going up, what is it going to be? $500 just to get yourself a McDonald's, is it? Is that where we're going to just keep moving forward without keep increasing all of them? That's not a solution.
The rest, just bad luck, decisions, life choices, whatever, lost a job, just...
The majority is loss of jobs, and the measure EE being replaced with measure AA,
What's
which
that?
meant that if you were paying $750 a month rent, now the landlord does not have a cap on how much.
Oh, the rent control
Exactly.
that they allowed
So
that to, like, yeah.
And that displaced so many people so rapidly that we had some doctors out here, fresh, brand new doctors.
Yeah, I think that the price caps with the rent is one of the biggest things that makes a difference in the US, because it's done individually. There's not really much kind of government control in it in the same sort of way as what there is in the UK. Well, actually, there's not really any government control for it in the UK either. It's just that if landlords try to charge too much, then they just don't really get that many people apply for the housing. Whereas in America, I think that the housing's a little bit more in need. They seem to be able to get away with it a bit more. But putting up the prices so that you can no longer afford your rent, that makes a very big difference to a person's life instantly, because they suddenly have nowhere to live. But adding money onto the price of food, each item of food individually, those are small increments, and people get away with it. The shops and the companies get away with it because it's little bits at a time, so they don't get highlighted or flagged up anywhere near as much or as quickly as what they should do. Whereas when people put the rent up, it's like an instant big difference to people, so it stands out instantly. And that's the reason why kind of rents and homelessness is being kind of highlighted and put down to rents going up. But it's not just rent, it is all of it. It's just that the other factors, the other parts, the utilities, the fuel prices, the food prices, clothing prices, all of it, and also government prices. The money from our housing associations, council tax, all of the other stuff. They're going up so much that they're all impacting. It's all of these things that's all causing the same problem. It's just that the housing one leaves people in a position where it's going to stand out the most from an external perspective, I guess.
But doctors nonetheless couldn't afford the rent.
So there were doctors living here when they first got here because they didn't earn enough to pay for rent until they worked for a few months and they could save up.
And so a friend of mine is staying with another guy that I work with. You know, I do a lot of handiwork, like I said. He's turning his homes into trampoline nursing homes. So the nurses come from abroad and they rent his space. But they're...
What sort of society are we living in? And how does America, the number one country around the world, reach a stage where even doctors are living homeless, living rough because they can't afford the rent? Newly qualified doctors living rough. This is what, the third or fourth time we've heard it in this, and I've heard this dozens of times watching other videos on this. It's not just people saying it, they genuinely are there. I've watched some of the interviews with some of the people, and they've been a bit coy about where they're working because they don't want to obviously have anything that's going to impact their job or anything like that. But these people really exist. This isn't just people saying it, they really are like it. It is happening. How does the leading country around the world end up in that situation?
Like $3,500 a room that's less than 750 square feet. It's not enough. It's not enough.
So what do you guys do all day? Like, you plan your future?
Well, yeah, we do that, and we really are trying to.
Find him.
You guys,
No.
you see what's going on here? Come on, give us a break, please.
Don't worry about it. It's all right. It's all right.
Okay, thank you. Sorry guys.
It'll just be like another couple minutes and we'll be done.
I want to record.
So we deal with that.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the questions?
We're just talking about, like, you know, all the questions that people ask about being here and everything.
Our youngsters, we try, because a lot of our youngsters have not been given the things that they needed for survival.
So your counselors out here too for some of the.
Of course.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people.
I mean, it's a
that
family,
have mental
right?
illnesses here, and yeah, we are family. We look after whoever comes here. We don't ask them to leave unless they get violent, and then they still can come back. You know, but they come back without the violence. The violence has to stay wherever, or they have to figure out another way to deal with it.
Yeah.
Right now, we're focusing on cleaning up the blight. Still, when we got here, we remediated a lot of it, but there were piles as high as that camper over there of other people's garbage. You know, this was a dump site. Everyone came here and dumped. So we cleaned it up, and now that we have, now we're faced with the thought of eviction defense. So now,
You mean the city might kick you out?
yeah, well, they might. They are highly.
I heard in Stockton they came in with bulldozers one day without a warning. It wasn't as nice as this. It was, but came in one day and it was leveled in the end of the day. And everybody, they're like, you got 10 minutes to get your shit. And they were like, and then they rebuilt it, but like,
You still lost your
no
stuff.
warning.
Right. Do you
They're
know?
not going to do that shit here, right?
No.
Well, but it's possible. But do you know the damage that causes? I mean, mentally.
Well, I know, except you're already barely hanging on, and then you're starting over.
Right.
It's, yeah.
Plus, you're already living homeless. You've already got nothing. You've lost pretty much everything. You're only just about existing, and then you've always got the threat that the government's going to come in and take that last bit of life away from you. The last thing you've got. Yeah, look at the conditions they're living in, and they're even in threat of having that taken from them.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's think about you just moving, period. You got your job, you and your wife, you know, you guys are now moving across country. That process, just that takes, you know, and you got everything together now. You know, you can pay for the movers. It's still a daunting process. So imagine someone just going in and ripping all that from under you and saying, have a nice day, which is what Caltrans used to do. They used to go to the encampments, take what they wanted, put it into their personal vehicles, and chip everything else. The last car said, have a happy day, have a nice day.
Yeah.
And a big ass sign, have a nice day. The police sent us down here. So with amnesty, they said if we came down here, we'd be okay. They would not ask us to leave. So we're going to try to hold them accountable for that.
Now, before my trip, I would have thought this camp was a bunch of vagabonds that you don't see very often. But the day before, I had witnessed the same thing at another makeshift camp in Stockton. Here, people were doing the same thing, squatting on land in a cobbled-together camp with the hopes that one day it might become their permanent residence too.
So you're gonna live here for a long time?
No, I don't plan a long time, just enough to give myself a house, man.
Yeah.
My main thing is I'm 50 years old, gonna be next month, damn near. I just wanna be able to have mine. I'm tired of getting out of my house, dealing with the women.
Yeah, imagine that you're a normal guy, 50 years old, or a woman, 50 years old, working all your life, and all of a sudden you can't afford your rent anymore, and you end up homeless because the cost of living has gone up so much. 50 years old, after a life of work, and you're now living on the street because your country has let you down so badly. This isn't just the United States, this is happening right across the whole of the West. The UK, all through Europe, everywhere. This isn't just the US. This is ridiculous, isn't it? We're supposed to be the leading countries of the world, the richest countries and the most powerful countries, and this is how we're living.
Even the kids, well, the kids can have the house, you can have the house, I'll get my own.
Yeah.
You know, so I was working, job, got hurt at work. Now it's time to just save, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's easier here than sleeping in a parking lot, you know.
Okay, so after spending a lot of time witnessing the homeless situation in California and talking to people on the streets, I realized a lot of stuff. One thing I realized is there's a hierarchy on the streets. At the bottom of the homeless class status are the people who sleep in doorways or in sleeping bags on sidewalks. Then you have the people in tents. Above that are those who live in their cars and RVs. And at the top of the homeless pyramid are people like these folks in Oakland who have constructed their own ramshackle communities. They collect disability and government checks and use their money to improve their lives, not to support a habit, people. I know, I was shocked. A lot of the homeless people I saw in Oakland were people who I thought I would not see. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought most of the people I'd encounter were going to be tweakers and drunks and addicts who stole for a living to support.
I think that a lot of the time the people that you do see sleeping in the doorways do tend to be the tweakers, aren't they? They are the main hard drug addicts. And the reason why they're in the doorways is one, because they're trying to get money because they need to feed their habit, just to get away, just to take the sickness away. And also because people that are living genuinely homeless because they can't afford to live, their minimum wage job isn't enough to cover rent, and that's why they're homeless. Or because a few bad decisions, or they're split up with someone or something like that, and that's why they become homeless. And they can't afford to get out of the situation. That's why they're having to live rough. They don't want the tweakers living with them. They don't want to be sharing their house, their area, their field, their underpass with smackheads, because they can't trust them. You end up with the smackheads on the outskirts because they're the ones that people don't want to trust. They can't be trusted because their habit rules. It's not that they're bad people, it's just that they have to take away the sickness, that's all there is to it. And anybody that's ever had any type of addiction, whether that's smoking cigarettes or alcohol or hardline drugs or painkillers, anything like that, then you'll know that, you know, it's an easy place to get into and a very difficult place to get out of. So yeah, they might not be trustworthy, they might be pretty horrible people now because you can't trust them, but that's not the people themselves. That's what's happened to them because of the addiction. So I don't want people to be thinking of them as horrible people because they're smackheads, because yeah, they are untrustworthy and you've got to watch them because they're smackheads, but that's not them. That's what they've become because of the drugs, and people need to remember and recognise that. But either way, they're going to be on the very outskirts, and then on the next setting you're going to have the people where they're transitioning from, they're used to having something over their head. They normally live in a normal house, a normal apartment, but they just can't afford the rent anymore. So now they've been forced to live in their van, or they've been forced to live in a caravan or a shed or some other type of shack. Something that you should be keeping your lawnmower in, not people. And then you've got the other ones which have been featuring mainly in this video, which are the people that have kind of realised that this is how it's going to be. They're trying to get out of it. They're trying to get back to normal life, but they just can't. They know that no matter what they do, they're never going to be able to afford to pay the rents the way the rent is. And even if they do afford the rent, then that's going to take up all of their money and going to have no money left to buy food or gas or electric or petrol, diesel or train fares or any of the other things that you need to live, to do a job. So they've just resigned to the fact that this is going to be their life. So now what they want to do is just try and make the best of it. They want to make an actual community to live in, an actual working society inside a ghetto, because that's what it is, isn't it? We should, as a society, be at a stage where that should even be a thing. The biggest, most powerful superpower on the planet, strongest economy, and you have subculture, an entire society setting up ghettos to live in like a third world country because they've been so abandoned and neglected by the government and by the country. When I'm talking about government, I'm not talking about the left, the right, or the in-between. I'm just talking about the entity of government itself, all of the members of government and all the parts that make up government, because that's what's letting these people down, isn't it? That's what's letting the country down and letting society down.
I saw a lot of community and progress and people with goals and ambitions. Many people in communities like this are far more self-sufficient than the crowd you see on sidewalks who can't form a sentence because of years of addiction. I went to Oakland with a preconceived notion of what I thought I'd see and came out with an enlightened story to tell. Who'd have thought? However, this would be far different than what I would see when I crossed the bridge for San Francisco the next day. That video will tell a different story.
Okay, well, I think he's at the end of his video. Is that what you pictured in your mind when you thought of California in the United States? America, the number one superpower and the largest economy on the earth. One of the biggest states, or one of the most popular, most well-known states in the United States. Is that what you had in mind? What about the people from America watching this? Is it the same in your states? Assuming you're from somewhere different to California. Yeah, I've seen a lot of different footage from a lot of different areas and it looks like it is. What about your country? If you're from other countries, if you're from other countries around Europe, or what about in Australia or South America? People all around the world watch our videos. Let us know in the comment section what it's like in your country. What are your government doing to try and help the situation? And is it getting worse in your country as well? Is your country like America where the situation is getting much, much worse every single day? To a point where it's almost out of control. We've got two separate civilizations, two separate societies living side by side. The one where the governors from the area pretend that one half of the society just doesn't exist and just pretend that they're not there. And when they start to show up too much, when people realise that they're there and it starts to become a big political thing, then they run the bulldozers through. They push them off to somewhere else. They don't do anything to actually help the problem or cure it. And the problem's getting worse, much, much worse. People just can't afford to live. This is happening in every Western country. I'm sure it's happening in every country around the world, not just the West. What are our governments and societies doing to stop it? Nothing. Prices are going up. Companies like the oil companies, energy companies, food companies, they're not being reeled in by government. Price caps aren't being added. They're not being forced to make more realistic pricing on their products. They're instead just charging what they want. They're just raising prices, knowing that people have to have their product. You have to have gas, you have to have electricity, you have to have a roof above your head. And they know it, so they're just putting the prices up more and more and more because cost of living is going up. Everybody's raising their own prices so much more so that they're never out of pocket. And that just self-perpetuates because the companies supplying food and growing food, they charge more. So then you pay more for your food, so then your outgoings are more, so then you need more on wages. If you're getting more wages, then the company employing you, they don't want to take a loss, so they start charging more for their products. It just goes round in a circle. So at what stage do we put a stop to this and make it go backward? Or are we just going to keep on making it so that things are becoming more and more expensive, and instead of going to a shop to buy a can of pop for £1, $1, we're going to be handing over a 5 note or a 10 note or something like that? You're going to reach a stage where a gallon of fuel is $30 or $40, £30 or £40, but wages are 5 or 6 times the amount to what they are now. What's the point of keeping increasing the prices and then increasing wages to try to match it at such a speedy rate as what has been happening? Because you just end up with the same situation, just different numbers. We need to actually stop the problem. We need to roll it backwards, not just keep escalating it and allowing these different companies to get away with keep raising up the prices, allowing housing associations to keep ramping up the prices so they can extort more and more money out of people. Same with the gas and utility companies, the food companies. Basically everybody, every group out there that know that you have to have their product to survive as a normal member of society. They're basically extorting as much money as possible out of everybody and raising the prices more and more to see how much they can get away with. And right now they're getting away with astronomical amounts. And nobody's doing anything about it. The people that should be doing something about it is the government. The governments of our countries. They're the ones that should be reining all of these people and groups in and stopping it from happening. But they're just not. So the situation is just getting worse. We're getting more people left homeless. More people can't afford food. More people can't survive in society. Well, like we said earlier, as people get pushed out of society and they end up homeless and they end up not being able to keep their job because they're living homeless, then you end up with a lot of jobs not being done. And then you end up with a very big problem because society can't even function then. The people that can afford to live in society, they can't get their food because there's nobody in the warehouses to stock the food. There's nobody working on the farms to produce the food. Tell me what you think in the comment section. What's it like in your country, and what do you think is the only realistic way that we can stop this from happening? Because this is happening and affecting us all, isn't it? This isn't just America. This is what we're looking at right now, but this is a global problem. What do you think should be happening to stop this from happening? What measurements should our government and society be taking to stop this from happening, to try and roll it back and to try and get people off the streets and back into houses, to get the prices back to a reasonable amount again, so that people can afford to live a basic way of life at the very minimum. As a side note, like all of our videos that are controversial in some sort of way, which is usually most of our videos, they end up getting demonetized by YouTube. Now you'll still end up seeing adverts. Apparently it's okay to show adverts on it, just not ones that can be monetized by us, which means that we earn no money. The only way that we can survive as a channel is by having an income. This is what we do full time. The only way that we can get an income on monies that are demonetized, which is most of them, is by you clicking the super button, which is the heart with the $sign in it, and donating towards us, helping support the channel. We really need you to subscribe, and we need people to help support the channel. All of our videos are almost always exclusively demonetized, and we don't have sponsors because we're showing controversial stuff a lot of the time and people don't want to be involved with it as a sponsor. But we want to bring you the videos that really matter. So the only way we can do that is with your help. So please help support the channel. Okay, thank you for watching. We hope that you've enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time.